So this is my purpose. I am trying to give you guys a background to Genesis. I'm trying to equip you so that you know some of the arguments that are going to come down the pike at you, and just so you guys are ready for some of the things that people are going to say. All right? Like I said, it's going to be some tests. There's going to be some quizzes. I know those of you who took the class last semester with apologetics, with the whopping 2 projects that I still don't know have been completely turned in, and the outside reading that I still don't know has been told me what you've read. All that stuff. So grades are pending on that one. But yeah. So there will be legitimate, you have to turn this in. And last semester was a little bit more informal. Okay. Note on sources. Please, when I reference something, it does not mean that I condone it. There are some books that I outright do not condone, but I own them, and I'm going to make you read them because I want you to see the point. Okay, I'll give you for instance here. When I was debating, and I use the word debate loosely. Where is it? When I was debating back and forth with people online, which back in the day that used to mean something. There was a website called cryptozoology.com I used to go to a lot. And there was a whole creation evolution section that you could just argue with people. And there was this guy by the name of Finbar. I don't know if he was a Redwall fan or what. But we used to argue back and forth. And he referenced this book as the best source on evolution. I don't know that it is. But Ernst Mayr is an evolutionary biologist, I believe, or was. He died. But this book is an explanation of evolution from an evolutionist's point of view. I think it's important, okay? One time I got in trouble with some parents because I did a creation evolution debate, and one parent in particular did not appreciate the fact that I made his child study evolution. Now I answered all the critiques, but there are people out there who do not appreciate it when you make them read the other side. I think it's valuable, okay? Because if you cannot accurately explain the other side's point of view in a way that they would agree with, so you believe this? Yes. So you would agree with this? Yes. So you would agree with that then? Yes. Okay, now that we at least know we're both on the same page, let me tell you why you're wrong. Okay, don't word it like that, but I think something like that is valuable. But as you'll look through this book, obviously there's some notes, but as you look through this, you're going to find some information in here that has been debunked already. In fact, some of this information, specifically when we get into the embryo drawings and stuff, some of it's been debunked for over 100 years, and this book I think was put out in 2000. So we'll talk about that. There's some issues that you're one guy put out a book, he called it Zombie Science, because he's there's these certain arguments that have been killed and they just keep coming back to life. And he's you just put a bullet in that head and put it down. But the argument just keeps coming back. And so what I want you to do is I want to provide you with some information. I'm going to provide you with some information from their point of view so you can understand more accurately. I'm going to try to present them as fairly as possible, but I can't promise that I will be unbiased because I'm not. Okay, so I'll have sources that are strictly evolutionary in perspective, so that's one of them. Another one that's going to be strictly evolutionary is going to be this one. Carl Sagan was an astronomer. He basically rips into religion. If you took apologetics, the whole argument of there's the dragon, the invisible dragon in my garage, that whole illustration comes out of this book. So these two, I'll also pull out Richard Dawkins. He has, off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of his book. It's not God is Not Great. That's Hitchens. Anyway, Richard Dawkins, God Delusion. That's his book. So I'll pull those books out, and they're just anti-Christian screes. I mean, they just don't like God. Okay, so that's one source that you will see from an evolutionary point of view. I have a whole ton of books here that are from more of a theistic evolution point of view, or what is known as intelligent design. And so books like this are going to be books that are more, we have a problem with the theory of evolution as far as an explanation for everything, so there has to be more to it. And so Darwin devolves. So what?
It's not a Christian standpoint.
Not specifically, no. And some of these guys might be Christians, but from the perspective they write, they're going more of what I call it, but it's because it's what's called intelligent design. Mm-hmm. And so the intelligent design movement is basically a minimum commitment creationism where it's we believe there was a designer, we can't tell you who that was or anything about them. Yeah. So that's where something like this is going to come into play. Some of these other sources that I have here. So Eric Metaxas is a fantastic writer. If you get a chance to read his stuff or listen to specifically his biography, his biography of Martin Luther. He has on Audible. He reads it. It's so good. Right now I'm reading through his biography of Bonhoeffer. And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer is just amazing. And so Eric Metaxas is just a really, really good author. And we might listen to some of his stuff. But he wrote this book, Miracles. And in the beginning, he basically takes evolution at face value. And he basically just says, we're just going to assume evolution's true. And he starts going through some of the things in there that would be required for evolution to happen by chance. And so even if we take evolution as fact, there are still things in here that you have to go, that just doesn't work without a guiding hand of some sort. And so you can take that. So as I reference these sources, I'll try to explain some of them. Obviously, I have Charles Darwin's book, because if I'm going to talk evolution, you kind of need the guy who kicked this, ball and got it rolling. I love the back because it's a picture of Darwin on a monkey's body. But this is basically his evolutionary writings, and so you can peruse that if you so desire. And then this book, Love Thy Body by Nancy Pearcey. This delves more into the homosexual, trans, other issues that come up, but it ties it back to Descartes, and it's going to tie it back to Darwin, and it's going to tie it back to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. So what I want you guys to get the impression of is this. When you start rejecting a lot of what's said in the first stages of Genesis, it really does have a cascading effect throughout the rest of most of your decisions. Okay? I'm not saying that if you're a theistic evolutionist that you're, going to go believe in the hookup culture. But what I'm saying is a lot of the problems we have today really come back to a rejection of some of the simple truths laid out in specifically the first few chapters of Genesis. So there are a lot of aspects. The one we're going to start off with in a lot of ways is the creation-evolution conflict. But as I'm about to explain, that would not have been the focus of the early audience at all. Okay, so I'm going to comment on it because it's important to our current discussion of Genesis. But just understand, the ancient Israelites would have had no concept or care about the creation-evolution controversy. It wasn't a thing. Okay, so I'll explain that as we go on. But anyway, so as you do your reading, these are some books that I would recommend to your knowledge. Some of these I would even recommend grabbing a copy of either through Audible or Kindle or a physical copy of the book. Probably physical copy because it costs as much as a Kindle, which is insane. But get some of these, have them in your personal stash. If you are going to have one book on the homosexual and all that agenda, that it really is Love Thy Body. Like that is probably the best. It's just it covers so much. Kind of makes you feel sick at times, just because you're like so terrible. Not just the homosexual thing. It's the abortion, the other things that happen to people because they basically devalue life. Again, I'm not saying homosexuals devalue life. I'm saying the worldview that creates the abortion mindset and all those other things. So anyway, just a powerful book if you haven't read it. So those are some of the sources. Like I said, you will also be reading some out of Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes, which will be just some important little notes, and I'll tell you more about that probably tomorrow. Okay, so that's just a note on sources. So there you go. That's the intro to the course. Now, as we get going, I do have this question for you as we just start out. Here's the question. Do you take the Bible literally? Yes, Rory. Quick, put the food in the mouth. I don't have to answer the question.
I would take it literally outside of like the poetry books.
Okay.
Some of the poetry books you can take literally.
Okay.
But I mean, poetry is meant to be taken
Okay.
not just literally.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on that? That's really good. Those are some really good points, because we have to remember there was an original audience to this book. This book was written in time at a certain point. So we've got to keep all that in mind. And so when we say we quote unquote take it literally, we're taking it as a piece of literature that was written to an audience. So that is, if that's what you're getting at, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would boil all it down to we take the meaning of the Bible literally.
Okay.
Because I've been in plenty of situations in churches and Sunday schools where, well, this word right here and this, and like, well, yeah, that's also a translation. So like, we take the meaning of the Bible literally, the original meaning and purpose of it, yes.
Okay. One guy I was listening to put it this way. He said, when we talk about taking things literally, we take them in their sense. We take them in the meaning that was intended. So he says, for instance, in the poetry books, to reference what Zach was saying, in the poetry books, Jesus is referred to as the door. We take that literally in that he is a door, but we don't take it literally in the sense that he is a wooden thing that separates two rooms from each other.
Right.
And the fact that we know what a door is means we know how far to take that explanation. Okay? So there are certain word plays, or there's certain images that God will use to evoke a certain meaning to the text.
Because it's literature.
Because it's literature. So there will be poetic. So if you do a study of the genre of the Bible and all those other things, there are ways of saying things that will produce a certain result. Okay? So when we started talking about the idea of taking things literally, we do have to say, what does literal mean? And it really is taking things in the sense that they were intended. So this is going to be an important thing that I want you guys to understand. We are not going to overly get metaphorical. We're not going to overly go spiritual on this. Okay? Now we understand the Bible is a spiritual book. We understand the Bible uses metaphor. That's not wrong. That's okay. But we're not going to go so far that we sit there and spiritualize everything. The Bible, specifically Genesis, was specifically written to the children of Israel, specifically as they were about to enter the Promised Land. So it had specific meaning to them. We need to understand that. Now the Bible will tell us later that all these things were written for our learning. So there are things we can learn from this, but there are ways it was said, there are certain cultural things that we don't quite understand. We don't have to spiritualize it all. We can come back and say, historically speaking, this is what was happening. Oh, how do I apply that to me? Okay, I can apply it like this. Cool. Doesn't change the meaning of what was said. Okay? We do also have to take the natural meaning of the words. Okay? So you'll see this where people will try to re-explain the word day. Okay? It's a tough one because you really can. You can look at it and you can say, oh, well, I mean, you can do this with it, and you can do that with it, and you can make this connection and that connection and that connection. Okay, but what was the sense that the author was trying to express? Day. I mean, it really is something where you're bending over backwards to unexplain it. Okay? So that's why a lot of times we're going to take the natural meaning, understanding, however, that there are times where you do have to do a little bit of a deeper study because this verse over here might be very clear while this verse over here might be a little vague. And so you have to kind of compare them, figure out where that tension is. There's going to be one source that I play for you where a guy takes the meanings of the words expanse, firmament in the King James, and he's going to take that idea of the expanse and he's going to unpack it and make some cosmological statements that you kind of watch and you're like, whoa, that's rather deep. Okay, there may be things that God has hidden in the text to try to help us understand things a little bit more. But you've got to be very careful with it because God is not slipping in, black hole cosmology necessarily into the text. He could be, we don't know, but the early Jews would definitely not have gotten that. Okay, so he is going to speak to people in the language that they understand. He may drop hints. We'll talk about some of those hints. But there's a lot of stuff here that we have to take the natural meaning. I'm going to keep referring back throughout this course to what we call Occam's razor. All right? Occam's razor, really simply, is this idea that among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. Okay? In case you haven't realized, this stuff is actually not in your notes. So I think most of you have caught on to it. This is kind of the introduction, but it's not actually covered in the outline. All right? But as you look at this idea of Occam's razor, if there's one thing you grasp out of this whole introductory discussion, is this idea of Occam's razor. This is a rather convoluted definition. It's simple to understand, but it's a little more technical than I like to go. But again, Occam's razor, among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. Okay? So the more times you have to kind of explain your way around things, the more likely it is you're just kind of making stuff up. I like the way Occam's razor is explained like this. If the plain sense makes perfect sense, seek no other sense. So go with whatever is the plainest reading. I'm not saying that's the only way you can read it. I'm not even saying that's always the best way to read it. I'm just saying that tends to be the way we would naturally take the text. And that's how we're going to kind of roll with it throughout this course. If the plain sense makes perfect sense, seek no other sense. All right? So that's something that we're going to dig into as we go. And let's just say there's going to be a lot of things that we apply Occam's razor to throughout the course. All right? Any questions?
What is the meaning of it?
42. Okay. Now, next one. As I've already mentioned, I am requiring you to do some reading that is outside of your camp. Okay? So, whether you're reading from books like The Origin of Species, okay? Which I don't know if it's helpful or not.
Book burning after we read.
Maybe. So the reason I have books like Richard Dawkins, and I have Christopher Hitchens, and I have Ernst Mayr, and the reason I have these books is so that you guys have access to things that don't agree with you. Okay? Like I was saying, I used to teach high school, and one year we did a creation evolution debate. And so I looked and I said, I am going to make some of the students in the class study evolution. And I actually gave one of my students a specific source to what I thought were really good evolutionary arguments. And I got in trouble for it. All right? The parent was not happy. They went to the pastor. The pastor had a talk with me. And I was like, I explained, like I said, any of the excuses, anything they came at me with, I explained it, and I could show them why it didn't actually prove evolution. My point was, you need to look at the side of evolution, and you need to actually engage with what they say. That's what I did throughout high school. I enjoyed it. I was a nerd. But that's what I did, and I learned a lot about evolution because I engaged with evolutionists. Okay? Like I said, even last night I was watching a video where an evolutionist was talking, and I was like, oh, I've never heard that argument. That's actually a fairly good argument. I don't have an answer for that one. All right? And so there are things that I'm like, oh, because you need to remember, these people are intelligent. They know what they're talking about. Sometimes. There's a book we'll talk about called Icons of Evolution that some evolutionists keep bringing up the same zombie arguments. But you need to understand that the people who buy into evolution are not stupid a lot of times. They have a good reason for it. Now, it might be that they just haven't looked at this argument over here yet. Or it might be they have no other choice, because to admit any other choice, they're admitting the existence of a creator, and that's not acceptable. Okay? In fact, some of the quotes you'll read from evolutionists is, we can't allow a divine foot in the door. So I believe it was Watson or Crick, one of the guys who discovered DNA. He's like, just remember, no matter what it looks like being designed, it's not. And so when you have to remind people, like, I know it looks designed, but nothing to see here. Okay. Feels like you're in denial. All right?
There is no water.
And so if you only listen to your own opinions or the opinions of people who agree with you, you will not learn. Okay? So you have to be willing. I'm also going to say don't listen to sources that parody the opposition. Okay? So if you're listening to a source that just mocks the opposition and, oh, you're stupid, it's not helpful. Like I said, I was watching that discussion last night between an atheist and a creationist, and the creationist has a smash an atheist thing that he does, and so he has a hammer with science written on the hammer, and he hits a SpongeBob, and he's like, I'm gonna beat some knowledge into you. And it's like, okay. I mean, I guess that's quirky, but I don't know that that's helpful. I just don't know how helpful that is. So just be careful. Don't listen to sources that will parody the opposition because they're not helpful. You got to listen to sources that will take the other side seriously. Now, if you can't find one that will take the other side seriously, just go to the other side and listen to what they say. All right? Sources that use wrong methods to prove their point are untrustworthy, whether they agree with you or not. So there are times where you'll listen to a certain person and you'll go, I don't know about that. And some of this comes with just research and comparing sources and doing things like that. If you open a book and there are no sources in the back, probably isn't one you should listen to. I think I brought it with me this time. Here it is. Yeah, this one. Yeah, so this is a book. As you can tell by the cover, this is a high quality piece of work that looks like it was printed off at someone's house. And there's the author on the back. It's fantastic. I'm not saying this is wrong. It is a collection of stories that, this was reported here and this was reported here and it's cool, and it's supposedly stories that were collected by missionaries of various creatures they ran into. I enjoy these books. I find them fun. However, I don't know that I would authoritatively quote this and say, well, this guy in the jungle said this, because the sources are this.
Looks like something you'd buy in a state park gift shop.
It really does. The bibliography just gives you the sources, doesn't tell you like what page the stuff was found on or anything. Like it just.
My first English one too.
It really does. Yeah, it looks like somebody. It does. It looks like somebody's.
Doesn't know how to.
Yeah, and so, again, yeah, Bigfoot creatures have a history that stretches back farther than newspaper tabloids.
If we want to talk about that.
I have more books on this subject than I would care to admit. It was a passion of mine in high school. So anyway, so this actually stretched beyond high school, including today. I used to drive around with a camera so that I could, get a picture of Bigfoot if he ever came out. I realize that kind of dampens my credibility sometimes, but I like to think that it makes me creative. At least I never walked around like this guy.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, you've
never
done that.
I couldn't see you wearing.
I would never dress in all khaki. All right. So like I said, make sure you actually are checking sources. Make sure you're not. We're moving on. Okay. Now, here's an example. As we talk about various topics in this course, you are going to come upon many, many different people who have different ways of explaining the same topic. Okay? So I'm going to give you a list of guys. Now, John Lennox, up here at the top. John Lennox, he's a mathematician, extremely bright guy. He is a scholar as much as you could ever call him. He's brilliant. He does not believe that the 7 days of creation are literally 7 sequential days. Okay?
Would you count all of these guys as scholars?
I will for the paper, but no. And ish.
Okay.
But I'll let you work on them for paper purposes. Okay? And so there are times where it's like, some of these guys, they never, finished high school. And so you're kind of like, from a technical definition, that's not a scholar, even though you may know a lot. So John Lennox, for instance, okay, wrote a book, 7 Days That Divide the World. He does lectures on it. He talks about the idea of, hey, if we take this meaning of day and this meaning of day and all this, he'll unpack day in a way that you are like, okay, I can kind of see some of your reasons. Okay? Someone like Ken Ham is going to come at it from a very, very literal, like 6 24-hour normal days. Okay? Michael Heiser, he's going to come at it from a different perspective, probably more in line with someone like John Lennox. Now, these two guys are both, actually all these guys are Christians, but they have different ways of looking at it. So he's going to be more of your, I think what you would call progressive creation. Michael Heiser, he doesn't commit to some things. Like I don't know exactly where he stands, but he at least opens the door to say, I think there was more time there than we say. Okay? Kent Hovind, he's going to be very, very literal. So these two guys right here are going to be on the same page, but he's going to use sources and methods that I don't agree with. So as you watch, I used to play some of his videos for my class because he does all this creation series lecture. I started double checking some of his sources. The way I did it is I went to an evolutionary website and just kind of started watching their review of him. And I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oof, yeah. Oof, yeah. And I basically just started like just reading what they said. And I was like, oh yeah, I can't really argue with that. And so there are times where you have to go to the evolutionary side and say, how do they respond? And as you read through, you're like, really, they're speaking the truth. And that's why I don't use him a whole lot anymore. Because if I have to double check every single thing he says anyway, why? I'll just do it myself. Now I might use some of his stuff as a springboard to be like, ooh, that's a fact I'd never heard before. And you use it as a springboard to go, oh, actually he was right. But, you know, it's just a thing. You have to be aware of different people's interpretation. And again, they may all come from different points of view, but they're all still Christian. They just have a different way of looking at things. Okay, so those are some scholars that you can reference. Okay, so as we get into it, as we study this out, there's a few things you need to understand. Now these are in your notes, so if you are tired of writing already, these things are already there. Okay, some presuppositions we go into this study with. First of all, we are fallen creatures. Okay, the reason this is important, the reason that we are fallen creatures is important is this fact: you are tainted by the effects of sin across all your decision making. Okay? So that means our understanding is damaged. Our conscience is damaged. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just not functioning exactly as they should be. For some, it's your intellect is not as high as other people's. Okay? That's fine. Nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing to be ashamed of at all. All right? Now, we are fallen creatures, which means there may be people who are a little bit more susceptible to certain things than others. Now, we've talked about this in other regards, but there are people who are a little bit more susceptible to, let's say, the theory of evolution or to skepticism than other people are. There's a taint to it. I think there's some people who are more given to they just believe than others. Okay? You guys have run into those people before who you're like, you don't second guess anything, do you? Nope. All right. Neat. You know, and you meet these people. I remember I talked about the geocentricity thing. I remember talking with a guy one time, and he was in a church that taught geocentricity, and they taught that the earth didn't spin. So basically everything went around the earth. So they believed that the sun went all the way around the earth every day, and all of that. Which I'm like, hey, if that's the way God did it, I don't have a problem with it. I just don't think that's the way God did it. But anyway, I remember this guy talking to me, and he said, yeah, I mean, that makes sense that the earth doesn't spin, because, I mean, like, we'd be thrown off of it. I mean, it would be like throwing a bacteria off a basketball while you spin a basketball. I mean, that's probably a similar size proportion, but no, that's not. But it's just, there are some people who they are just not skeptical at all. And you're like, what? You know, and I have literally had discussions with people who don't believe the earth spins, they don't believe any of that. We look at them and say, how can you be that, like, quick to believe that? But you have to understand, when evolutionists look at us, that's how they look at us. Like, you don't believe in evolution? Are you stupid? I mean, that is how we are viewed. Like, you are an idiot because you don't believe this thing that is definitively proven. Okay, we laugh, hopefully we all laugh at flat earthers, but you know, you laugh at a flat earther, or maybe you don't, I don't know. Oh yeah, sure. Duh. Okay, but just understand, there are people who use biblical verses to try to prove the flat earth.
I believe in it.
Cameron's like, deleting the...
Yeah, can we take a break for like phone check?
I gotta take care of something. All right?
Yeah,
now,
donut shaped earth,
I wouldn't sugarcoat it, because then you'd eat that too. Now, next thing, so we're fallen creatures. Next one, our fallen nature has corrupted and limited us. Again, kind of already explained that. So we have to have a standard that is outside of us. Okay? So as we study this standard that is outside of us, it has got to be something that is pure. It has got to be something that is perfect. What is your standard going to be? That's a question you have to think about. Because there are some people who says, well, I am going to take the scientific establishment, or I am going to take the latest scholarship, or I am going to take whatever I feel, or whatever. I mean, there's all sorts. If you go with the book, Love Thy Body, Nancy Pearcey, plug, random. Your feelings are going to be a big thing that people use to determine their truth. Some people just say, if it's the way I think, then it must be true. That's another reason people take that route. And so again, it comes down to what is going to be your ultimate guide of authority, because our fallen nature has so limited us that it's really tough to, with a straight face, claim that I can be the absolute authority on anything. Okay? So the question is this: is the Bible going to be our ultimate and final say on these matters? I will use the idea, you'll see it in your notes there, called Sola Scriptura. Sola Scriptura basically says the Bible is the final and ultimate authority, but on things that pertain to life and godliness. Okay? So it's kind of that idea of the things that actually apply to our faith, the Bible is the final authority. I'm not going to go to the Bible on a geometry problem. That's not what Sola Scriptura teaches. It's not, the Bible answers everything, because the Bible probably is not going to answer when Abraham Lincoln was born. Okay, you have to go to another source on that one. All right? Now, if the Wikipedia says he was born 74 billion years ago, then you can go to the Bible to go, I doubt it. But you get, the Bible has the ultimate and final say on matters of faith and practice. Okay? Ultimate basically means it's the highest authority, and final means that is the final place that we go. Okay? Nothing can circumvent the Bible. Okay? Only through Christ's word can we fully understand the Bible. So what's nice is we can use the New Testament to go back and kind of shed some more light on the Old Testament. We've got to be careful, because we don't want to change the meaning. You know, there are plain teachings in the Old Testament. We don't want to change that meaning. But we can shed light with what Christ says. And that's why there are times where I'm going to reference the Gospels to back up something in Genesis. And the whole reason I do that is because Christ himself will put his stamp of approval on stuff. And that's how that works. All right, next one. We don't shift our views because of the latest scholarship or theories. Okay, I'll give you a for instance, and then we can apply this however we want to. There was a time where the Hittites were doubted. There wasn't evidence for the empire of the Hittites. And so there were people who looked and said, well, I mean, the Bible must be wrong on this. How could an entire empire vanish? So if you went by the latest scholarship during that time, you know what you would have believed? That the Bible was wrong because there wasn't evidence for Hittites. But you know what they eventually found? Evidence for the Hittites, to the point where they're even in Age of Empires. All right? I mean, it's just, there you go. So we don't shift because the latest scholarship says otherwise. There will always be latest scholarship that will tell us we're wrong. As you look through even human fossils, so to speak, there are plenty of human fossils that were found out to be a hoax or not human at all. But if you were going by the latest and greatest scholarship of that moment, you would have thought, oh, look at this, it's a human fossil. Not that that's a problem, but it's an ape man fossil. Well, some of them were straight up fakes. Like straight up human jawbone with a monkey face, or vice versa. Like, they were known to be fakes. What does that tell us? You have to be very hesitant to accept the latest and greatest scholarship, because again, some of it is not as great as it's made out to be. Okay, so here's one that we'll hopefully touch on later. As you study out whale evolution, you're going to find all this wonderful transitional fossil scholarship that they have. And you're looking and you're like, whoa, it went from this to this to this to this to this. And I even saw it in that discussion I was talking about last night, where the guy was like, look, you can see the whale evolution happening. Yes. But what they don't realize is the size of these creatures varied so much that it's like a creature this big evolving into something this big, and then evolving into something this big, and then evolving back into something this big, and then it became a whale. And you're like, hold on, That's not what it looks like in the pictures. And it's like, yeah, because the pictures draw this creature this big, and then this creature that big, and then this creature that big. And so it looks like it's growing, but really it's... And then there's other structures that have to vanish and then reappear and then vanish and reappear. And so you're looking at it, and from just the really strict, like, this is how it looks on the outside, you're like, oh, cool, it's a progression. But when you actually take a step back and go, let's actually look at these creatures proportionally and where they live, that's not right. So if we jettisoned our belief just because one thing of scholarship contradicted it, you'd basically be jettisoning your belief every year. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, there are things that we don't have a good answer for. I don't know how to answer every question that comes up, all right? Typically, you can do a little bit of research and find a fairly good answer, but you will probably not have an answer to everything. And just because you're stumped doesn't mean you're wrong. It might mean we just don't have the full picture yet, all right? And so I just want you to understand that we're not going to shift our views and jettison them just because of the latest scholarship. We're looking for a consistent scholarship over a long period of time. We're looking for consistent repetition of experiments. We're looking for a lot of things. I think we can agree that the Bible has had such an impact, and the Bible's been preserved, and there's a lot of other reasons we would buy into what the Bible says. But those are some of the things that we're going to go into this course. I'm going to explain some of the later scholarship. I'm going to talk about some of this stuff. But again, we don't automatically jump ship because we hear something new. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, let's take a stretch, get up. You got 10 minutes to go do your thing, and then we'll come back and we'll get actually into the text itself.